our perception of what others think about us. In other words, who we are, we interact with people, we perceive what they think of us, and we make that the definition of who we are. Let me give you a short story. I was told for many, many years that I came across as snotty until someone got to know me. And I really, really struggled with that, and I couldn't figure out why, and I didn't want to internalize that perception because I knew it was incorrect. And some of my best friends throughout my life have told me, I mean, granted, we're best friends now, but they would tell me, when I first met you, I just thought you were really snotty. And that was really difficult for me to hear. And so how do we take what other people perceive about us and internalize it or reject it? We have that constant analysis going on. Do I agree with what people think about me or do I not? And that helps us define our self-concept. Interestingly, I learned that a lot of it was the way that I hold my head. Long story, we'll get into that. I'm sure at some point I will tell you the Coca-Cola factory story, so you'll get a laugh out of that one, but that was my defining moment of self-concept. We'll talk about that another day, but I learned that I tend to look out of the top of my eyes. And so that became a huge wake-up call for me, that my nonverbal communication based on my body posturing was creating a negative perception. And so, if you look out of the top of your eyes at someone, there's a definite negative connotation if you have your head straight, and then there's another connotation if you're looking down at somebody. So even something as simple as the way that we hold our head can change people's perception of us. So we form our self-concept by either agreeing with what people think of us or disagreeing, and then of course then we say, okay, if I'm disagreeing, why and what do I need to do differently? So the concept, the term that we use for that is a looking-glass approach. In other words, basically a mirror. Looking glass is like an old term for a mirror. So, Beauty and the Beast had the looking glass. So we use that kind of approach, meaning we learn who we are based on interactions with others that reflect who we are back to us. So basically, people serve as a mirror to us. So we express something and they acknowledge what they perceive about that communication interaction, and we learn from them, this is the way that I came across, this is how I am perceived, this is who I am. And so here are some specifics. We believe what someone says if they repeat something we've heard other times. So if our whole lives we've been told, you're a good athlete, and then someone watches us in competition or in, a game of some sort, and they say, wow, you're a good athlete, that's a looking glass for us. We had that reflected back to us. My perception of you is that you're a good athlete. So we believe it because we've heard it other times. It corroborates or it affirms what we already believe about ourselves. We believe what someone says if we perceive them to be credible. So we're less likely to use the looking glass approach with someone that we don't really respect or we don't think has reason to give us a perception about ourselves. So that can be somebody that we have a dislike for or someone that we don't know well. We have no reason to believe that what they say is true because they've never proven themselves to be trustworthy or credible. So the looking glass actually is normally people that we have relationships with that best define our self-concept. And then we incorporate comments into our self-concept if they are consistent with other comments and our own experiences. So if someone says, you are really friendly, and we've heard that in the past, and we agree that we are friendly, I would say, yes, I'm a friendly person. So my own experience also says, yes, I'm friendly. We incorporate that into our self-concept and that helps define us. Okay, we also create a self-concept in association with groups. So we form our self-concept based on attitudes, beliefs, and values of groups with whom we associate. So I'm a student, I'm an athlete, I'm overweight, I'm funny, I'm good at the piano. So throughout our lives, we tend to gravitate toward people that are like us. So obviously you're a student, you're surrounded by students much of the day. If you're an athlete, most often you're going to be on a team of some kind, or at least you're going to practice with other athletes. If you are a good musician, you typically are in a band, or you go to lessons and you're around other musicians. So we base our concept on attitudes, beliefs, and values of those same similar types of people. Peer pressure kind of plays in there then, because that's a powerful force in forming and maintaining our self-concept. Because unfortunately what happens is that group think mentality. So, I am a member of this group, I'm a student, so I associate myself with students and I value what students value and I believe what students believe. Well, what happens unfortunately is then groupthink takes over, and sometimes we lose our own ability or identity to say, no, I can be a student but still not necessarily agree with everything that other students do or say or think. And so that peer pressure, or that, desire to stay involved and connected to that group, that can change our self-concept, because we feel like either we have to fight against the norm or we just have to accept it. And so that's something that we need to be aware of, especially in the group setting, is making sure that we're not being influenced and our self-concept isn't changing based on other people. And groups provide support for people who are part of the group, and then also help solidify your self-concept and identity. So overall, groups are very helpful for identity and self-concept. There are just some issues that we need to be aware of, like the peer pressure. Okay, and then the roles that you assume also help create a self-concept. So what are some examples of roles that we assume that affect our self-concept or identity? And you may look back at your list, your I am statements, and say, this is a role that I've assumed, and I would absolutely say that it has affected my self-concept or identity. That certainly plays a role when you say, I'm identifying myself as this. Then based on that role, your behaviors will often follow and your beliefs will follow. Parents can affect that. If you're thinking of the parent-child relationship, your parent is in a role and you are in a role as a child. So you assume the role of the child because your parents are in a relationship with you. With a relationship with the teacher, you assume the role of the student because there's the role of a teacher. And so we kind of have to modify some of the roles that we assume based on situations and contexts, but that still helps play into our self-concept. Okay, so here's an example. A couple may say that marriage alters the relationship. So further on that idea, when you assume the role of a husband or a wife versus just boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance, things can be defined differently. In other words, you may be together for years. My husband and I were together 2 years before we were married, and we've now been together 11 years, married for 9. And when we were dating, we had independent roles apart from each other, even though we were a couple. When you become a husband and a wife, your roles do change. You are no longer a single entity. You are part of a couple. Even though you were a couple before, it's different, and the roles of husband and wife do change things. And especially when you begin to live together, once you're married, you have to decide, what roles do I assume as a wife? Am I going to be the one that cleans inside and my husband's going to do all the yard work? Or are we going to redefine the roles, the traditional roles anyway, and say, no, I really like doing the yard work, so I will mow the grass and you clean the kitchen. So the roles need to be defined and established. Another example, when parents find out the sex of the baby. If a woman's pregnant, you find out the sex of the baby, what behaviors are initiated to establish components of self-concept even before the child is born? Many studies have been done that show when a parent finds out the sex of the baby, they think about the baby differently, they talk to the baby differently, the clothes that are purchased are different, the toys, the books, everything changes when you know the sex of the baby. So there, a self-concept is created for you the role that you assume is based on whether you were born a boy or a girl. So definitely a lot of factors play into this, because there's the biological innate factors, and then there are the social cultural factors. So a really broad idea here, but we're trying to tease it apart a little bit. Okay, how we label ourselves also helps us create our self-concept. We've talked about this before. It's based on our attitudes, beliefs, and actions. It's what we tell ourselves about ourselves. So people that have low self-concept tend to tell themselves things that are negative. So you're not good enough, you're lazy, you're not smart, you're not good looking enough, whatever. So we tell ourselves things about ourselves, and often, you know, that adage, we're our own worst critic, that can be very true with self-concept, because other people are often much more forgiving of us than we are of ourselves. So what we tell ourselves is really important. If we constantly put ourselves down, we're creating a low self-concept. If we constantly tell ourselves that we're capable and we're competent and I believe in your abilities, that makes you feel a lot better about yourself. It's also how we interpret others' self-concepts. So there's always that comparison. And, you know, I kind of try, I'm not always successful, but I do try to live by the adage that when you compare yourself to somebody, someone is always going to be better than you, but someone is always going to be less than you. So you end up just who you are. You know, you're never going to be better than everyone. You're never going to be worse than anyone. So what good does it do you to compare when you're always going to be in the middle of the road, just who you are? And so I kind of like to keep that in my mind, because how we interpret other self-concepts, we can look at somebody from distance and say, oh my gosh, they have so much confidence, they're so self-assured, they believe in themselves, they have everything together. We really have no idea what goes on, you know, apart from what we see from a distance. But we interpret things, and our perceptions can be very wrong, but then that makes us feel worse about ourselves. And some people have a strong belief in themselves and don't rely on others' opinions. That's actually pretty rare, but you know, there are a few people that have said, I really like myself and I've worked to become the person that I want to be. And ideally, I think we all strive for that. I think we all do want to be the best that we can be. But some people feel that, you know what, I know that I'm capable and I'm competent and I have abilities to do things. And, you know, I believe that those are things that I'm going to continue to do. And they don't necessarily, they're not affected by other people's opinions, but I would say by and large, most people do let other people's thoughts about them affect them. Okay, this self-fulfilling prophecy, one of my favorite concepts, especially because I work with children, and one of the most common issues is children get labeled bad kids. And especially in the school system, but even within a family system, you know, there's always the bad kid. And that self-fulfilling prophecy is so crucial to who we become as people. And I often think about the movie Pretty Woman. And I know that, I'm assuming most of you have seen it, but if you haven't, watch it. It's an oldie but a goodie. Julia Roberts and Richard Gere are the main characters, and there's one scene in the movie where they're talking, and I guess he's kind of probing her about, you know, how did she become a prostitute and how did that unfold, whatever. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember specifically, but she says something along the lines of, when you're told something negative about yourself for long enough, it becomes easier to just believe it. And that has always struck me as such a powerful, you know, commentary on what people say about us and what we believe about ourselves. We become that. And often with self-fulfilling prophecy, another way to say that is the Pygmalion Effect. And the Pygmalion Effect, it was actually a study that was done, and it was done in a school system. And I want to say it was kindergarten, but it might have been first or second grade, but early elementary school. Children were randomly divided into groups. So literally lottery, these children go in group A, these children go in group B. 2 different teachers. Group A was, again, randomly selected, but teacher of children in group A was told, these are the brightest, best kids you are going to have